Lichtenau. I'm a senior partner with Bain& Company, and I lead for Bain our global carbon transition practice. I have the pleasure today to moderate a panel about the initiative from the World Economic Forum on sustainable, leaders for a sustainable Middle East and North Africa. This is an initiative that was launched by the WEF in 2022 to bring together high-level leaders in the region to accelerate the adoption of low-carbon technology and infrastructure, and also bring together public and private partnership. I have the honor and the joy to be joined by the very distinguished set of panelists today.
Thank you.
If I may start, first of all, His Excellency Mohammed Sulaiman Al Jazeer, who is the president of the Islamic Development Bank. Paddy Padmanathan, who is the vice chairman and the chief executive officer for Aqua Power. And Hatem Dowidar, who is the group chief executive officer for eAnd. Before I turn to my panelists to moderate the session, maybe a few words about what's happening in the region, because we've done a study as part of this initiative from the WEF to look at what's the starting point. And actually, climate change is critical for this region. When you think about global warming, the warming will be probably twice as fast in the region compared to the global average. So we expect almost 4-degree warming by 2050. And so both adaptation and mitigation will be critical. And you have fantastic examples of countries who have started to embed into their strategic plan climate commitment and climate action. You've seen many net zero commitments from the UAE and Oman by 2050, Saudi Arabia by 2060. Egypt taking the presidency of the COP27 was a huge sign. And you have many companies leading, and many of these companies are today on this panel, which is very exciting. But one key step when you think about climate action is clearly disclosure. And so we looked at the top 200 companies listed, publicly listed, and private companies in the region. And we look at how much they disclose on ESG and on climate. And what we found out is that actually it's very encouraging. 47% of them disclose on ESG. 41% report their scope 1 and 2 emissions, so emissions in their operation. And that's very important to drive that transparency. Now, the next step is clearly setting targets and delivering the target. And there it drops quite a bit. So you have only 12% of these companies who have a net zero target. Only 6% have a roadmap to deliver it. And only 2% have an SBTi target. And so the next step for the region is probably further stepping up the ambition and start to deliver against it. And that's the very exciting discussion we'll have today with my fellow panelists. So if I can start with Your Excellency, clearly the Islamic Development Bank has been very much leaning forward on the topic. I think you've made a pledge, it was in June this year, to make sure that all your sovereign operations are aligned to the Paris Agreement. You're really driving action towards mitigation and adaptation in 57 countries. It's extremely impressive. Can you tell us a bit more about where do you see the potential for the MENA region to actually lead on this topic? Because we've seen so many developments around renewable energy, hydrogen, and CCUS. So where can the region really lead actually the world on this topic of climate action?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good morning to everyone here. I hope you can hear me because I can't hear anything but the noise. So hopefully the sound system will take care of that. So I speak up a little bit. Okay, so that's what I want to make sure that I am heard. You're right. I think what you have said about our region and is spot on. The rest of the membership of the Islamic Development Bank are not far from there. I mean, if you take away Guyana and Suriname, I mean, the rest really have a lot to do there. We in the Islamic Development Bank, we have recognized the necessity of addressing these issues very early on. And we tried to do it with the governments through discussions, through education, through information and all of that. And I'm happy to say that we have been supported. I mean, during our last annual meeting here actually at Sharm el-Sheikh, we had support from our governors, and we have been very active trying to modify, if you will, or adapt our lending policies where they would be a little bit more biased towards climate-friendly projects. That's why we are targeting 35% of all of our lending to be climate-friendly by 2025. And I'm happy to report now that we actually have achieved 31% already. So we are going in the right direction. But the challenges are huge, be it in agriculture, for example. I mean, the impact of the environmental change in agriculture is huge, and this is why we are dealing with this food crisis that is facing the whole world now. It's not only because of the war in Eastern Europe, but it has been exacerbated by the war in Eastern Europe. And therefore we need, and we at the Islamic Development Bank, we have invested about $20 billion in agriculture, but also we are continuing to work with other like-minded institutions like the African Development Bank on the special agro-industrial processing zones. We launched, actually, I was in Nigeria a couple of weeks ago. We launched that. We have the rice food value chain. We have the cassava food value chain. All of these are going to provide food, but also they are enhancing the environment in the process. So there is a lot of work to be done, and this region, I think, is rife for that. Of course, just the night before, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and Prime Minister, he, with President Al-Sisi, they launched the Middle East Green Initiative. That's a very ambitious one, and that's going to transform not only Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has also the Saudi Arabia Green Initiative, but also in the Middle East, the amount of money that was put forward by Saudi Arabia and inviting other donors to participate also, that's going to transform. I mean, it's sending the right signal that the leaderships recognize that problem, because that's very important. And they are putting their money where their mouths are in terms of dealing with a very serious issue. This year is implementation. Next year we will be at the UAE. We're going to be taking stock. Who did what and who didn't do what. So I think there is a lot to be done. And we in the Islamic Development Bank, we're very proud to have 57 member countries that are in the midst of all of this debate and action also. And I'm a bit optimistic from the discussions I had with the countries themselves. On the financing coming from others, that's another story.
No, it's very encouraging to see the leaders mobilizing around it, and also the financing starting to come through.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about what Aquapower has been doing, Mr. Padmanathan, I think it's very impressive, and I think it's a good example of how the region can lead on renewable energy, hydrogen, water desalination. I think you have really marquee projects as part of NEOM with Helios as an example. The project you just announced yesterday around wind in the Suez Canal. Where do you see actually the potential for the region to be at the forefront of this development?
So delighted to be with you today. And the company I'm privileged to lead, I mean, the biggest contribution I think we are making, is delivering at scale, faster, at an ever-reducing cost. So as far back as 12 years ago, maybe counterintuitive, from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we're a Saudi company, we stepped full force into renewable energy, and on that first project itself, and that was deployed in Morocco, which is now fully operating, we were able to reduce concentrated solar power technology prices by 60% on one project, and have continued to drive the cost down. And concentrated solar is very important because it is fully dispatchable energy, taking the heat of the sun, storing it in molten salt, and running the turbines 24 hours a day. We have the largest single investment in renewable energy, $4.5 billion investment in Dubai, now coming online as we sit here and speak. All the towers are being lit and so on. To dispatch reliable, dispatchable energy. So no more intermittency, no more background noise about, but what happens when the sun is not shining? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 35 years, we have a commitment to supply at 7.2 cents per kilowatt hour. Sorry, even in this part of the world, some of the lowest costs of production of fossil fuels, this beats that hands down for baseload energy now. So we have been driving in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have a contract to deliver photovoltaic at 1.04 cents. Okay, because of the rampant inflation, rising commodity prices, and so on, we're going to hold that record for a while. But it'll come back down, so no issue. So we are showing the way of what is possible, driving technology forward, deployment at scale, not just in renewable energy, but also applying renewable energy into critical sectors, like a lot of discussion around climate change and renewable energy, quite rightly. Water is going to be a huge crisis that is cratering behind us. We need to look at, it's an energy-intensive process to treat water. So we need to be reducing the emission content of water desalination. So we, in Tawila in UAE, we have a plant, the first plant in the world at scale, nearly 900,000 cubic meters a day. 45% of the energy that goes into that is renewable energy. The next plant we do will be 70%. Third plant, 100%. So driving. And then most exciting for me, I think, is how we are able to now, there's a lot of MOUs and discussions around green hydrogen. And I understand, it's expensive, first of a kind. So the standard conversation, does the chicken come first or the egg? Market. Does the market come or do I supply the hydrogen? So the people who are going to consume say, give me the hydrogen. They say, well, okay, I'll give you the hydrogen, but you tell me that you will buy it. We decided, look, it sounds like a very brave decision, but to us really, given that there is 100 million tons per annum of gray hydrogen, there is a market that needs to be replaced. So we said, look, stop. Let's go forward and deploy the first project at scale. It's gone into construction, the first project at scale in the world. 600 tons per day of green hydrogen. That is more hydrogen that's produced in the world by all the plants today. That'll come online in 2026. And through that, it's on site now, it's in construction, right at the top end of NEOM, a partnership with NEOM, investment company, and Air Products and Akopa. Now that it's gone into construction, we see how quickly we can bring the cost of even green hydrogen down. We are confident enough now to go forward and replicate that plant in Oman. We're working on that. We expect to take it into financial close next year. Discussing exactly the same block here in Egypt. So I'm very proud to say that this part of the world is showing global leadership in accelerating the transition, in effect, by reducing cost and deploying at scale.
It's very encouraging to hear not only you working on mitigation, reducing emission, but also clearly adaptation, especially on the water topic, and bringing the cost down by building things at scale is what is needed, not only pilots. So very encouraging. If I can turn to you, Mr. Doidar, clearly you transform the EN Group to a global technology company, also an investment company. You've put sustainability at the core of it. I think you mentioned many times that you feel there is a huge role that technology can play in making sure that consumers are aware of climate change, but also helping companies make the transition.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit more about how important sustainability is to you and to your company, and how much do you think that digital technology and technology more broadly can really help on the transition?
I think a decade ago, being environmental conscious and environmental friendly, a decade ago being environmental conscious or environmental friendly was something that was more personal, of leaders of companies thinking about the environment and deciding to take an initiative. But today, the world has really changed. Today, the different stakeholders are all expecting companies to be responsible and to take a leading role. We see customers becoming more aware, and in their choice of companies that they buy services from, they want companies that have okay? They want companies that have a strong ESG program, that have that environmental message as part of what they do. Also, staff in the company. So our colleagues are also becoming more and more aware, and they want to engage more in a company that is environmental sound. Governments and regulators are looking at that. So there's two choices. One is to just do the minimum to satisfy all these stakeholders, or to actually take the initiative, be on the lead, and be a good example for the stakeholders and for other companies. And that's what we decided to do. So a few years back, as part of being an active member of the GSM Association and a partnership with the UN and the SDGs, the whole industry committed to 2050 net carbon neutral. And that was also in line with the UAE pledge for 2050. However, since then, we have been working as a company very hard to understand what are the drivers for our emissions and how we can change them. And we are making today a much more aggressive pledge. I will not say it now because we announce it later today. But we've taken that very, very seriously. And it's amazing how this has really catalyzed the entire company to look at it, from the different ideas that are happening, the way we do our run our buildings, to carpooling that we introduce, so people use less cars to come to the office, to the hybrid working model, to the way we work with our partners, with Ericsson's, Nokia's of this world, how we can reduce the emissions coming from providing the business to our customers, to changing the fleet to electric cars, negotiating PPAs with the different governments where we operate to get clean energy. So a lot of things started happening, and it is exciting. So it is exciting for me and the company, but I can see the entire leadership team and the entire organization being a lot more passionate about this. And I think that it is going to also have a lot of direct return, because as we are doing it more and more, and I think our colleague here has said about the cost of green energy, we actually see that a lot of this transformation has a positive payback to the company. So it's more of an investment rather than a cost. And I think as also more of the utilities in the countries we operate offer PPAs, we're going to be able to be even more effective. And one of the things that we've seen is the investor community also becoming so conscious about the environment that we see that direct effect even of our attractiveness as an investment. So our share price have been reacting positively as our ESG rating has grown up higher, and we see that investors that were not interested in us or investing in this sector in the region are coming now because they see, okay, there is a company that is taking care of the environment, not only taking care of business. So it's all going into this kind of virtuous loop where everything is becoming positive. The other aspect, of course, of our business is that we also have a positive effect by helping people reduce their emissions as well. Because with technology, with what we're doing in AI, what we're doing in providing seamless communication, allowing people to meet remotely. I mean, here you can see people are videoing and probably streaming this session, so there are thousands of people that are watching without having to be here.
Yes.
This is a direct result also of the telecom industry and what it is doing to help the climate change.
And it's very inspiring to hear how you linked sustainability to the strategy of the company and value creation, because that's the only way to accelerate this topic. Clearly, this transition will cost quite a bit of money, so we'll need to be able to mobilize finance on this. Your Excellency, if I can ask you, when you look at the region, what is the appetite that you've seen, especially on the topic of green financing, green bond? How fast is that emerging? And probably linked to that, one of the big elements of the COP27 was also mobilizing climate finance for the developing countries. Could you tell us a bit more about these two topics that are absolutely critical for the region?
You're right. These are not only very promising, but they have already been proven to be useful in this process. We have what I call the virtuous cycle. And that virtuous cycle is that for you to be able to finance an environmentally friendly project, you have to have an environmentally friendly financing. So the green sukuk can finance green projects. But you need green projects to be able to back up your sukuk, otherwise the market will not accept it. So that's a virtuous cycle that has been created, and I think now it's been very well recognized in the market. We have just issued our latest sukuk, $1 billion. They were very much in high demand. If anything, we have a lot of central banks and investors that were unhappy that we did not allocate enough for them. So that's a great signal that this mode of financing is picking up. But of course, we at the Islamic Development Bank, being the largest Islamic financial institution, we are trying our best also to educate the community, especially even in the non-Muslim community, of the benefits of using such asset-backed financing, because with all of the debt accumulation happening in the world, we need something that will be accepted and at the same time not add to that debt burden, but rather become an asset-based and share in the risks that are involved. So in the Islamic Development Bank, we are also helping our countries develop their own sukuk markets and showing them how to go about it, because it's a new instrument. A lot of countries are more familiar with conventional financing, and therefore there is something to be learned there. And I think the appetite, as I mentioned to you, has been really high. We have had no problems. The only problem I had was complaints that we did not allocate enough for this central bank or that financial institution. So this is a great mode that we are very happy to promote, and at the same time to explain, because I think there is a lot of explaining to be made, and we're ready for that.
It's very, very encouraging to hear. Now, looking at the further scaling that we want to get in the market, you mentioned the need to have green projects to be able to have green financing.
Yeah.
Mr. Padmanathan, if I can turn over to you, clearly you're now in the phase of not only winning new projects, but delivering these projects at a time where you have extremely high inflation, supply chain disruption. What have you seen as the biggest barriers, but also enablers that you need to have in place to be able to scale your business and the green transition the way you described it?
Look, I think it's extremely important to understand that there is a huge amount of liquidity in the market. Everyone now understands the criticality of energy as an enabler for economic development. I have no idea why they didn't understand it before, but they for sure understand it now. And they absolutely recognize the need for that to be green. So, look, we are adding typically 13+ billion US dollars of assets every year. We have zero problem. And we are operating in the inverted commas so-called emerging markets, not in the emerged markets. We have no issue. Every project, and we are doing projects at scale. So we are talking about $6 billion of financing on a single project, $4 billion. Not a single project. Every project is oversubscribed. Okay, so I think we need to, completely different, by the way, let's not misunderstand the need for financing substantial parts of Africa. That's a different story. But for doing these kind of projects at a rapido pace at scale, which we must in order to remove the carbon emissions from the biggest polluters, there is no issue with financing. The challenge is, well, I'm sorry, to be very blunt, lack of ambition, inertia. Projects take too long. In some countries, permitting takes far too long. We're talking about a project that can get constructed in 24 months. It takes 48 months to permit. So you do permitting over 48 months, and then you rush and deliver in 24 months. Nonsense. So these are the kind of things that government, and clear signals, market signals from the government for their commitment beyond Paris. Yes, they've all signed the Paris Agreement, but they need to show, here is how I'm committed and here is my roadmap. Not, I'm going to get there by 2050. How am I going to do it by 2025, by 2030, 2035? So that they can, private sector can then pile in and deliver significant appetite. So the other important point to recognize is that I think private sector also now understands when we were financing projects that were delivering solutions at 13 cents, 15 cents, 25 cents per kilowatt hour. These are not numbers that were unheard of just in the last 5 years in projects. And all of a sudden, we are now able to deliver at 3 cents, 4 cents. It's a completely different risk proposition. The default risk at that such a low price, just stop for 1 second and think. When you don't have any energy, and then all of a sudden you're being given energy at 24 cents, what are you going to do? Well, one of two things. Either very quickly you realize you can't pay and you give up, default, or you use that very sparingly just to do the basic. If you get energy at 5 cents, all of a sudden you're able not just to live happily ever after, but to make cakes, sell in the village. Use that energy to create economic multiplier. So it's a completely different risk paradigm. That is starting to be understood also by the financing markets. So the issue is not finance. The issue is much more about correctly structured projects being delivered by people who have the competency and capacity within a framework that the markets can trust, so the market-based economies around us, and coming through and deploy.
It's very encouraging, and then it's great to hear the importance of pragmatism actually to be able to accelerate, and things like permitting are absolutely critical. Now, if we think about the consumer is important, and I know, Mr. Dawidar, that the consumer is core to your company, at the heart of the company. When you look about the change in importance of sustainability to consumer in the MENA region in the past 10 to 15 years, how much has it evolved, and is it starting to show in different buying patterns and behaviors in the market?
In our region, actually, we realize that there is a much younger population than many other regions. So if we compare ourselves to Europe or even to the Americas, the young population here is growing. I think today, one of the colleagues from Google was saying on the search that searches about ESG has gone up by 3,000% in the last year. So as these young populations are growing up and becoming more and more aware, they are going to influence the trends. So in the way they want to choose which provider they want, which service they want, and how they consume these services, that awareness is growing more and more. It's not, of course, going to be every single customer, but we see the trend very clearly that more and more of them are engaged and interested to see what companies are doing. And this is why when you talked earlier about, we started a few years back issuing an ESG report, and now we're starting to report on our emission level. And as we make the pledge for net zero, we're going to report every year where we are on the journey. So this engages the customers and engages also our staff, because that's very important that the colleagues in the company feel that the company is true to what it's doing by serving the community, not only trying to make money. And I think this is very important, that social responsibility becomes in the center of what we do. The other thing, of course, is that as we become more advanced in this journey, we need to invest in helping our customers, and in that sense I'm talking other enterprise as well, because we work with consumers, but we have a lot of enterprise customers also to go on that journey, and how to use that technology to lower their emissions. And technology really has changed a lot. So intelligent, for example, in our case, intelligent networks that are able to recognize the patterns at different times of the day and scale down the energy the network is using is becoming something that is mainstream. I mean, a few years back, this was more of almost science fiction, that the network would self-adjust and self-heal and reduce the energy in real time. Now this is a reality. The network is able to see at night in this area, no one is using, you power down, somebody starts using, the network starts just giving enough power to serve the customer, but not too much to create emissions. So these technologies, using them for our business, but helping our enterprise customers use them as well, I think is part of our mission into really becoming a force for good towards climate change.
No, thank you very much for this. And maybe my closing question to the whole panel before we turn to the audience. One theme from COP27 is clearly the just transition. We need to make sure that as we transition energy and carbon, we make sure that there are no pockets of the population that gets lost in the process. And there is a clear role for government and policymakers, but also a clear role for company. Your Excellency, I would love to get your thinking around the just transition and what is required actually both from policymakers and from companies to help on making this transition just.
I think the first thing is that transition is not easy or inexpensive. So we need both. We need to facilitate through regulations and allowing for a reasonable time for transition, because you cannot just switch, and get renewable energy instead of fossil fuel or even biomass in some communities. You have to really have that leeway. Second, the financing. I mean, where's the beef? You remember that saying. Where's the beef? I think that's very important to have in this time as we go forward. I think the government regulatory regimes have to also adapt to the financing mechanisms that are needed for such huge projects, and at the same time making the prices of utilities more market-based, because that is going to be important. Luckily, the cost, let's say, of solar energy is going down significantly, so that doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to have to raise the prices of energy. But most importantly, that the economy is going to be market-based, because in the long sustainable haul, you're going to have that. If you don't, you're just accumulating distortions that will become much more difficult to deal with in the future.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if you have further comment from your side.
I think the important thing to understand in the context of just transition, we now have real space to be able to do just transition for a very simple reason, and I think it's important that everybody understands that. So for all of us in this room who are privileged enough to have electricity from across the world, it's tough to calculate an average number, because you've got all energy producers, energy exporters, whatever. But I think everybody will agree, all those practitioners will agree, it's somewhere in the order of about 14 to 15 cents as an average number. In some countries, it's as much as 40 cents. Nigeria, where the entire electricity system is generators and diesel powered, it's 40 cents, the true cost. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is blessed with all the energy, it's something more like 5 cents. But the average is somewhere in the 15 cents. That average is coming down to somewhere in the 3 to 4 cents. So just take Nigeria. If we were able to now deploy renewable energy at scale in Nigeria, not tomorrow, but it'll take 5 years, not more, start to do it at scale. We can deliver in Nigeria, credit risky, whatever, even there, 8 cents, 9 cents. Look at the gap between 40 and 8. There's a huge amount of space there for us to utilize some of that in order for inclusive development, bring the community as shareholders in the ventures that you create, train and develop and transition them so that they can continue to either participate in the transition or benefit from the transition and multiply, and decommission and pay off for that decommissioning. So I think it's extremely important to understand that you now have the ability, simply because technology is available, tools are available, we can use all that tool, the communication systems that we have, even that it's got nothing to do with power generation, can be deployed in the just transition. So I think it's extremely important to understand. Let's not waste our time thinking about thinking outside the box. We are at a time and space, throw the box away. Clean slate, because if you start thinking about outside the box, you're going to stay in the periphery of the box. No, we don't need any more boxes. Just clean slate thinking for a completely new energy paradigm. That's where we already are.
It's a great message. Maybe I'm wondering, we have just a few minutes left. From the audience, a few questions here. Can we have a microphone, please?
Hello. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was a fantastic panel. His Excellency mentioned something very interesting, that next year at COP28, we're going to take stock in what should have happened by then. My question for all of you is, what do you feel you would like to see your respective companies do by the time that we host COP28 in the UAE next year? Sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm Talal. I run the investment banking business at Deutsche Bank.
Many thanks. So COP28, what would success mean for your respective company in a year's time?
More like what he's doing. I think Aqua Power has been really a great example. We're proud of it in this region.
Thank you.
That we are having our own technology Goliath, if you will, in the renewable energy. We need more of those. We need more in the desalination area also. And we need, we have a lot of divides.
Yeah.
We need to bridge those divides. The electricity divide, we're working on very well. We need the digital divide because it has an impact on the environment. So the people running their errands by car or what have you, if you have that digital thing, you don't need to go. That is a lot of energy. That's a lot of climate saving activities. So I think this is what I would like to see going forward, and hopefully taking stock of next year in the United Arab Emirates.
Brilliant. Maybe we have time for one last question. Any last question from the audience?
We convinced them. We convinced them. They don't have
I think they're all convinced. I think you are so credible on the topic. So first of all, I want to say a huge thank you to my panelists. It's been such a pleasure. I think you brought very diverse perspective on the topic, but also a very encouraging message about the cost of technology coming down, financing coming forward, the ability to link actually sustainability to what the company does to value creation. I think these are messages that really show the acceleration. So in closing, when we look at the region, clearly there's been fantastic development so far. Much more to be done to have many more companies embracing net zero targets and delivering against them. But what we've seen is that technology are starting to come down the experience curve at a rate that make it so competitive that is actually something that is meant to scale. We heard that financing is becoming increasingly available, and there's actually huge appetite for green financing in the region. And we also heard the impact that digital technology is really having, not only on consumers, but on company in becoming more effective and efficient, and therefore also helping both on mitigation and adaptation. So what is needed now is probably to translate a lot of this objective into reality day to day. We need much more of private and public partnership to get there. And that's very much what the WEF initiative around leaders for sustainable MENA is trying to do, to bring this partnership together and make sure that we get to the acceleration. So thank you again to my panelists. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. And I wish you a fantastic rest of COP. Thank you.
You should have had Mark Carney. Mark Carney should have been here to hear this.
It would be fantastic if you could have joined. Thank you.